You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the June 19, 2023 meeting of the Long Beach Advisory Plan Commission. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
All right, get this show on the road? Okay.
Bob's muted. We can't hear you.
Good deal. Can you hear us now?
Thank you very much. Yes.
All right. Yeah. 1923. Roll call. Jim Deemer. Hang on here, Seth. Here. Beasley. Here. Ben. Here. Johnstone. Here. Matthew Carson. That's nice. Minutes, 5:15.
So moved.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Decisions and that's. Yes.
That's the.
Business, we had a solar ordinance. That came. Here's some addendums. Ordinance 50.
I hate to interrupt your meeting, but Bob needs to switch microphones with someone because we're just hearing like S sounds and hardly any of his voice. Not sure why.
Can you hear me now? Okay, can you hear me now, Marilyn?
Oh, that's 100% better. Thank you.
Okay, so the second addendum or amendment was under 154.082, under solar energy systems may be roof mounted. Size shall be limited to 2 megawatts. I don't know anything about watts and megawatts, but if Ken thinks that's good, I'm okay with it. And I think the building commission is going to be discussing that at their next meeting. Does anybody who knows more about megawatts than I do have any comment on that?
Is there a current limitation to the number of watts?
I'm sorry.
Is there a current limitation to the number of watts or megawatts?
I don't think there is. And I guess we can find out why from him. Because I'll ask him that at the building commission, okay?
I mean, I likely merits some level of scrutiny, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, and this is really just going to be set hopefully for public hearing, so this has got a lot of room for change. Next change that I had was actually under setback in the same section. The town talked about ground mounting electric systems may not extend into the side yard or rear setback. That implies that they can only be in the backyard. I'm just thinking we should spell that out and say ground mounted solar systems can only be in backyards. And that would be problematic perhaps for people who live on a corner lot.
then we're an example of that. We don't have a backyard, we have a side yard.
Don't have a, say it again.
We don't have a backyard, we have a side yard.
Yeah, so that's the question. Do we, and so do we want, or we could just say, they're not allowed in the front. That might be reasonable.
Yeah, I think the issue was not, so they're not visible to the street. So if I put one in my side yard, it'd be visible.
Okay,
And my recollection is the exact same, is that it had to do with visibility from the street.
and so are they, yeah, so they're supposed to not be visible, although you could put in your side yard if you put some kind of a shielding, you know, bushes or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So should we maybe say in back or side yards?
I would say, maybe we not even say backyard versus side yard, we just say is not visible to the street
Yeah,
unless.
But yeah, I think there's an additional concern that maybe neighbors would have to look at something that was unpleasant to look at.
Yeah,
So, but I think there's also screening, like screening provisions in there as well that would allow, you know, acceptance for that, provided that there were screening.
there's definitely ones for the flat roof. I read that one.
Right,
Where there's a screen required if it's more than the 4 feet or whatever,
right.
or if it's exposed. So there is language in there that talks about screens.
yeah, it
But
does.
it has to do
talk
with
about-
this.
And I guess it's kind of a judgment. We're not saying you can't see it. It doesn't say here you can't see it at all.
Right,
Because, you know, if you're gonna put up plants, they may start out small and take.
right.
So I guess I'm fine with back or side yard, if that's okay with you.
It's okay with
And
me.
then the screening part would be good. If you ever want to put in a solar system, you'll be able to do that. Okay, and then, under compliance and components, they have to comply with the current version of the NSC and NESC, and I guess we can get more information on that from Ken at the building commission. I thought about inviting here, but then I thought, you know what, he's gonna be at the building commission too.
He's on a trip.
Oh, is he? Okay, then that's good. And then under special requirements, there were a bunch of changes. Talks about the disconnect switches, for roof and ground mounted, whether you're AC and DC. They should be lockable labeled. I guess my only thought there is that I do think that if somebody's gonna put in a solar system and gonna put these switches in, they need to, when they first install it, notify the fire department where those switches are. Because that was, I think, one of the major impetuses for these changes was so that firemen weren't gonna get electrocuted by these systems. I think the fire department can keep a list and probably keep it in the truck. But that sounds okay, we can add that. And then there's some changes about EV charging, and I don't see anything controversial there. Anybody have any thoughts about any of that?
I mean, my one big concern, I guess, none of this sounds like it's super controversial, but, I think the way that the Indiana law is written is that, like, the idea of the Indiana law is to promote solar energy, and I don't think we can put a great deal of restriction on people's ability to install and use solar energy. And I think it probably merits going back to the state statutes to make sure that we're not kind of doing something unreasonable according to the state statute.
Yeah. So Chris, any thoughts on whether you think anything we're doing is outside of this?
I haven't spent any significant time with this.
Okay, why don't we do this then? Why don't we, I'll make a motion to, with the changes that we've made, send this to Chris with modifications and with, him to do some research on.
Well, I just wanted to add, because I'm same as Seth, sorry, I turned that off mid comment there. So, you know, as a reminder, the initial one that we followed very closely was the model one.
Yeah.
That was developed for Indiana, and Indiana law is very clear that, you know, essentially it needs to be the least restrictive and not hinder the use. And as Seth said, it to encourage the use of it. So some of these things may reach that level. I figured that we, in addition to the subdivision one, with the thought as I talked to Dr. Lemay, just to form everybody with the goal of everybody having a form of ordinance to consider at the next meeting, so that if you were inclined to set it for a public hearing, and then public hearings would be available on both ordinances, so that we can kind of conserve time and efforts and publications of notice. So,
Yep.
yeah, you're probably looking at August for public hearing of that, but that's, I think, what the process would be. And some of these may, like I said, I haven't spent a significant amount of time, because I know there's still some feedback coming from the building commission as well, with some recommendations that might come back to you before the next meeting as well.
Okay, so we'll plan to set the public hearing at the next meeting. Okay, anybody other comments on any of this?
No.
Okay, now we have a public hearing. And that is the public hearing on ordinance number 2023 blank. We'll get it a number, but this is the ordinance about the changes in the fines. So I will open the public hearing. This has been published, people have had a chance to look at it. We'll open it to public hearing, and I do think we have public comments there.
Just,
You still have to go through the.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody who wants to speak for it, speak out. Anybody who wants to speak against it, speak out. I'll now close the public hearing. So we've got the ordinance. Anybody have any comments about this ordinance? But these ordinances, because there were multiple places in our ordinances that dealt with these fines. And really the bottom line here was that we wanted to make it clear that people who built without permits, contractors who built without registration, would both be fined, and that minimum fine is $500 now, because it wasn't getting anybody's attention before. And we were having a lot of people basically ignoring it and saying, I'll build it and pay the fine. And that's probably not the best way to do things. One change, though, is that Mike pointed out is in section 1, chapter 155 on floodplain management. We want to change section 2 to the town of Long Beach Building Commission shall inform the owner. And I think that's the only change that we really wanted to make.
Couple of questions, Bob. Terminology which is used more than once. I'll use 151.999, that first paragraph, last sentence. Each day that a violation remains or is otherwise permitted to exist shall be construed as separate offense. Don't know what that means.
That means that if we find that there is a problem, we notify you that there is a problem. Every day that problem continues to exist, you are fined.
Okay, so why don't we just call it daily fine?
Yeah, Chris, is that?
Yeah, I think at some points, some of this just tried to mirror or reconcile the various, because there's so many different sections. So, yeah, we could say that these fines shall be daily, and each. I think that it's important to point out that it continues to exist shall be construed, but maybe just start off saying fines shall be daily.
I think so. I mean, it's clear then, and it would get people's attention. I think the way it's written now is you scratch your head and you say, well, what does that mean? Exactly.
So if
I construed it as meaning it was a daily charge, but not everybody's going to interpret it that way.
So if it's in each paragraph change that it says fines shall be daily, and each day that if the violation continues shall be construed as a separate offense?
And do we need to spell it out that clock starts ticking when either the building inspector, building commissioner, or building commission notifies the owner of the problem?
I think it's when the citation happens, right?
So it's when the citation is given. Okay, so that's implied. Okay. Good.
So does that, I just want to make sure. So fines shall be daily, and each day a violation continues shall be construed as a separate offense?
Yes, I'm good with that. And I had a second question on that, that range of $2,500 to $7,500. What triggers what that amount ends up being?
Well, this range is what you guys previously discussed and left open. I do think that, it's open-ended so that it leaves some interpretation of people being ticked off. I mean, you could go third, fourth, fifth, you could say it's $2,500. You could say it's 7,500 is the statutory maximum, so.
Okay, so those are maximum.
The outside is, the 2,500 was just jumping another level. It's very, not arbitrary in a bad way, but it's
Okay,
a decision
I
of the
get it.
starting point, but it
Yep.
does leave leeway, the 75, and if you want more clarity, you know, I think now's the time that you could do that as well.
Yep.
And change that in each, that if you the fourth offense is 2,500 at the next, or, that's solely up to you.
No, I know, I understand it now. Thanks.
So does it make sense to talk about a maximum if the idea is that we're not getting people's attention with $100? Maybe we're not going to get people's attention with $7,500. I mean, I guess that's my concern. Are people going to just ignore us? Or should there be a maximum?
So understand some of the portion of this, these are just the fine aspects, right? You also have your statutory, meaning under Indiana code, and the town code of enforcement. So injunctions, to make them stop, to remove, to do all of those things. I mean, there's one that's been resolved recently, right? And they agreed to pay a $5,000 fine, and it's getting resolved. So, and this is just the penalty portion so that they are reconciled, because some recent issues, they weren't consistent, or there were some misunderstandings. So in addition to, as you say, getting attention, or, I mean, really, we want to deter, and hopefully these never happen. This is being done for consistency, not to, yes, it gets their attention. Yes, hopefully people will be mindful of that, but you also have your other enforcement mechanisms as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have just a comment on this. I recently had a backsplash updated in our kitchen, and I reached out to the chief commissioner, and they said if it runs over $500, you need a building permit. So the person came in, and because we went over 5,000, it went from $50 to $250. And he said, shouldn't it be increments? I mean, I didn't go that much over, but because I think I went $300 over. There was some lighting that we improved.
So you're talking about a permit fee.
Yes, he thought that was punitive.
Okay, explain to me again. He thought
Okay, so even when I wasn't on the council, I don't wake up every day to break a law. And I had reached out, as I would as a citizen, and asked. And he said, if it's over $500, you need a permit. So the person that was doing the work came in to get the permit, and it went $300 over the 5,000. And it went from $50 to $250. And he said, gosh, wouldn't it, shouldn't there be increments? That seems pretty stiff, steep.
Yeah, I guess I thought it was a percentage of the job. I can bring that to the building commission.
Well, and I think that it's a good time to review all of these, just like the software's getting implemented.
For refund, but I just thought, well, wow. I mean, I'm honest. Because I guess if we would have done the work yourself, I don't need a permit, right?
Well, first, you got to make sure that what was told is correct. So that's probably worth a double check. Secondly,
Well, I mean, he has done work with the town. He designed our kitchen in the beginning. We had new lighting put up because the house is 22 years old, and we had new backsplash. Yeah.
but I think as the software is getting implemented, and now the application and the questions and some of the acknowledgements by homeowners and contractors are being reviewed, that now is appropriate time to review the fee structures as well.
I'm not asking for a refund or deed.
Yeah.
He said, because I mean, Bob and I paid the charge because he had to then increase our bill.
Sure.
So,
Okay, yeah, I'll bring that to the building commission and see
Okay.
how they feel about that. Okay, any other comments on this? All right, so we had a public hearing, it's been closed. I'll make a motion that we send this amended copy of the ordinance to the town council with a favorable recommendation.
So moved. That was your motion, right?
That was my motion.
Second.
Other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Cool.
how about Marilyn, Becky?
Closing matters, our next meeting is on 7/17/23. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Cool.